Soft piano music plays as the camera pans across a pristine suburban home. Inside, Claire stands at the kitchen counter, her fingers tracing the edge of a framed wedding photo. Her eyes are distant, filled with a mixture of longing and worry. 12 years, she whispers, her voice barely audible over the gentle tick of the wall clock. How did we get here, Daniel? The scene shifts, harsh fluorescent lights flickering to life in a sleek office. Daniel sits at his desk, tie loosened, rubbing his temples. His phone buzzes, a text from Claire. Miss you, dinner at 7? He hesitates, then types back. Working late. Don't wait up. As he sets the phone down, a gentle knock at the door. Eva, his secretary, enters with a stack of files and a warm smile. Thought you could use these, she says, her voice soft and understanding. Daniel's posture relaxes, a small grin tugging at the corner of his mouth. Back at home, Claire stares at the unanswered text, her reflection in the dark phone screen, a portrait of disappointment. She takes a deep breath, straightening her shoulders. Not giving up, she murmurs, reaching for a cookbook. The next morning, Daniel rushes out the door, barely glancing at the elaborate breakfast Claire has prepared. She calls out, I was thinking maybe we could try couples therapy. But her words are lost in the slam of the car door. At the office, Daniel's day is a blur of meetings and deadlines. But in stolen moments, his eyes find Eva, her laugh during a coffee break, the way she leans in to point out a detail in a report. It's subtle, almost innocent, but a spark is undeniable. Evening falls. Claire sits alone at a candlelit table, the carefully prepared meal growing cold. She blows out the candles, a single tear sliding down her cheek. Across town, Daniel and Ava work late, takeout containers littering the desk. Their shoulders brush as they pore over spreadsheets, and for a moment, time seems to stand still. Daniel feels seen, understood in a way he hasn't in months. Days blur into weeks. Claire leaves heartfelt notes in Daniel's briefcase, plans surprise date nights that he's too busy to attend. She scrolls through old photos on her phone, wondering where that happy couple went. Meanwhile, Daniel's connection with Eva deepens. Lunch breaks turn into long conversations. Inside jokes and lingering glances become the highlights of his day. He tells himself it's harmless, just a friendship. But deep down, he knows he's treading dangerous waters. One night, Claire can't take the silence anymore. She decides to surprise Daniel at the office, hoping to rekindle their spark. As she approaches his floor, her heart races with nervous excitement. The elevator dings. Claire steps out, a bouquet of flowers clutched in her trembling hands. Through the glass walls of Daniel's office, she sees him, laughing, relaxed, his hand resting casually on Eva's arm. Time seems to freeze. The flowers slip from Claire's grasp, petals scattering across the polished floor. In that moment, she realizes the true depth of the chasm between them. Daniel looks up, his eyes meeting Claire's. The laughter dies on his lips, replaced by a look of shock and guilt. Eva steps back, confusion etched across her face. Claire turns and runs, tears blurring her vision. The sound of her heels echoing through the empty hallway is deafening. Daniel calls out, Claire, wait, but it's too late. The damage is done. Back at home, Claire paces the living room, her mind racing. How long has this been going on? Was she blind not to see it? When Daniel finally arrives, the air is thick with unspoken accusations. It's not what you think, Daniel begins, but his words ring hollow. Claire's voice is quiet, filled with pain. I've been fighting for us, Daniel. Have you? The silence that follows is deafening. In the days that follow, their home becomes a battlefield of tense silences and tearful confrontations. Daniel swears nothing physical happened, but the emotional betrayal cuts deep. Claire oscillates between anger and desperate hope, unsure if there's anything left to salvage. Eva is transferred to another department, but her ghost lingers between them. Every late night at the office, every text message, now carries the weight of suspicion. They agree to try therapy, but the sessions are grueling. Years of unspoken resentments and misunderstandings come pouring out. Daniel admits to feeling suffocated, unappreciated. Claire reveals her fears of growing apart, of becoming strangers in their own home. Slowly, painfully, they begin to rebuild. Date nights are awkward at first, conversations stilted, but they persist, rediscovering small joys. A shared laugh over a bad movie, the comfort of a familiar touch. Trust, however, proves harder to mend. Claire finds herself checking Daniel's phone when he's in the shower, hating herself for the impulse. Daniel overcompensates, calling constantly, his efforts to reassure often having the opposite effect. Months pass. Some days feel like progress, others like they're right back at the beginning. But they keep trying, knowing what they stand to lose if they don't. One evening, as they sit on the porch watching the sunset, Daniel takes Claire's hand. "I'm sorry," he says, his voice thick with emotion, "for everything. For almost throwing away the best thing in my life." Claire squeezes his hand, tears glistening in her eyes. "We both made mistakes," she whispers. "But we're here now, that's what matters." It's not a happily ever after. The road ahead is long and uncertain. But as they sit there, fingers intertwined, there's a glimmer of hope. A chance to rewrite their story, stronger for having weathered the storm. The camera pulls back, leaving them bathed in the soft glow of twilight. The music swells, then fades to a gentle heartbeat. A question appears on screen. What would you fight for in your relationship? And what would you be willing to forgive? The screen fades to black, leaving viewers to ponder their own answers long after the video ends. Claire's heels clicked against the polished floor as she strode through the office, her heart racing with anticipation. She had decided to surprise Daniel, hoping to rekindle the spark that had been missing for far too long. As she approached his office, she paused, taking a deep breath to steady herself. The door creaked open, revealing Daniel hunched over his desk, his brow furrowed in concentration. He looked up, startled by her presence. "Claire, what are you doing here?" His words hung in the air, tinged with an edge of... Was it annoyance? Claire's smile faltered, but she pressed on. "I thought we could grab lunch together. It's been a while since we've done that." Daniel's eyes darted to his computer screen, then back to Claire. "I'm sorry, I've got a lot on my plate right now. Maybe another time?" Claire nodded, trying to mask her disappointment. As she turned to leave, she caught a glimpse of Daniel's phone lighting up with a new message. The name Ava flashed across the screen, accompanied by a heart emoji. The office door closed behind her with a soft click, leaving Claire alone in the hallway, her surprise lunch plans crumbling around her. Inside, Daniel's fingers hovered over his phone, torn between responding to Ava and calling out to his wife. In the end, he did neither, burying himself back in his work as the distance between him and Claire grew ever wider. Days turned into weeks, and Daniel found himself spending more and more time at the office. It wasn't just about the work anymore. It was about Ava, her laugh, her understanding nods, the way she seemed to truly see him. "You look stressed," Eva said one evening, perching on the edge of his desk. "Want to talk about it?" Daniel hesitated. Then the words began to flow. He told her about his fears, his dreams, things he hadn't shared with anyone, not even Claire, in years. Ava listened, her eyes soft with empathy. "I'm glad you feel safe enough to share that with me," she said, her hand briefly touching his arm. The touch was innocent, but it sent a jolt through Daniel's body. He knew he should pull away, set boundaries, but he couldn't bring himself to do it. This connection with Eva felt like a lifeline in a sea of loneliness he hadn't even realized he was drowning in. Meanwhile, at home, Claire was fighting her own battle. She pored over relationship books, planned date nights that Daniel always seemed too busy for, and tried to ignite conversations that fizzled out almost as soon as they began. One night, as Daniel mumbled another excuse about working late, Claire made a decision. She would plan a romantic weekend getaway, a last-ditch effort to save their crumbling marriage. "I've booked us a cabin for next weekend," she announced over dinner the following evening. "Just the two of us, no distractions." "What do you think?" Daniel looked up from his plate, surprise etched across his features. That sounds nice, Claire. Really nice." For a moment, hope blossomed in Claire's chest. Maybe this was the turning point they needed. The weekend arrived, and as they drove to the cabin, Claire allowed herself to dream of reconnection. But even as Daniel smiled and held her hand, she could sense his mind was elsewhere. They hiked through sun-dappled forests, shared quiet meals by candlelight, and for brief moments, Claire caught glimpses of the man she had fallen in love with. But then his phone would buzz, and that faraway look would return to his eyes. "It's just work," he'd mutter, fingers flying across the screen. On their last night, as moonlight streamed through the cabin windows, Claire reached for Daniel. Their kiss was tender, familiar, but lacking the passion she craved. As they made love, Claire couldn't shake the feeling that Daniel was holding something back. That part of him was somewhere or with someone else. In the quiet aftermath, Claire's hand brushed against Daniel's phone on the nightstand. She didn't mean to look, didn't want to invade his privacy, but a name caught her eye. Ava. With trembling fingers, she opened the message thread, her heart sinking with each word she read. The exchanges were intimate, filled with inside jokes and shared confidences. There was no evidence of physical infidelity, but the emotional betrayal cut deep. Claire's vision blurred with tears as she set the phone down. Beside her, Daniel slept peacefully, unaware that their world was about to shatter. As dawn broke, casting long shadows across the cabin floor, Claire faced a crossroads. Should she confront Daniel, try to salvage what was left of their marriage? Or had the damage already been done, trust irreparably broken by unspoken words and hidden messages? She watched Daniel's chest rise and fall, remembering the vows they had made, the life they had built together. But now, that life felt like a house of cards, ready to collapse at the slightest touch. Claire's heart ached with the weight of what could have been, if only they had communicated better. If only Daniel had resisted temptation, if only she had seen the signs earlier. But what ifs couldn't change the reality of where they found themselves now? As Daniel stirred, Claire steeled herself for the conversation that would change everything. Whatever happened next, she knew their marriage would never be the same. The sun climbed higher in the sky, its warm light a stark contrast to the cold dread settling in Claire's stomach. She took a deep breath, preparing to wake Daniel and confront the truth that lay between them like a chasm. But before she could speak, Daniel's phone buzzed once more. Ava's name flashed across the screen, a final nail in the coffin of Claire's hope. In that moment, as Claire stared at the glowing screen, she realized that sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes, despite our best efforts, relationships crumble under the weight of unspoken words and divided loyalties. The cabin, once a symbol of potential reconciliation, now felt suffocating. Claire slipped out of bed, gathering her things as quietly as possible. She left a note on the pillow, 3 simple words that carried the weight of 1,000. Unspoken conversations, I know, goodbye. As she drove away, leaving Daniel to wake alone, Claire's mind raced with questions. How had they drifted so far apart? When had a stranger become more important to her husband than she was? And most importantly, could she ever trust again after this betrayal? The road stretched out before her, a metaphor for the uncertain future she now faced. Claire didn't know where this path would lead, but she knew she couldn't stay in a marriage built on secrets and half-truths. Back at the cabin, Daniel would soon wake to find himself alone, forced to confront the consequences of his actions. The emotional affair that had seemed so harmless so separate from his real life, had just cost him everything. As Claire's car disappeared around a bend, the story of Daniel and Claire, a tale of love, loss, and the devastating power of emotional infidelity, came to a bittersweet end, but perhaps in its telling, it might serve as a warning to others. A reminder that relationships require constant nurturing, honest communication, and unwavering commitment to weather life's storms. In the end, we're left to ponder, is emotional betrayal worse than physical, and would you forgive it? The answer, like love itself, is complex and deeply personal. But one thing is certain, the choices we make in our most intimate relationships have the power to heal or destroy, to bring us closer or tear us apart. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, casting long shadows across the empty cabin, the silence spoke volumes. It was the sound of a love story unraveling, of trust broken and dreams shattered. But perhaps, in time, it could also become the first notes of a new beginning, for Claire, for Daniel, and for all those who recognize themselves in their story. The message glowed on Claire's phone, a digital dagger piercing her heart. She read it once, twice, her fingers trembling as the words sank in. The world around her blurred, the kitchen fading into a haze of muted colors. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She simply left. Daniel returned to an empty house that evening, the silence deafening. His footsteps echoed through the rooms, each one a reminder of what he'd done. He called out Claire's name, his voice hollow and uncertain. No response. It was then, standing in their bedroom, her drawers half empty, her favorite perfume missing from the dresser, that the weight of his actions truly hit him. He sank onto the bed, head in his hands. How had it come to this? The memories of stolen glances, lingering touches, and late-night texts with Eva flooded his mind. It had started so innocently, a distraction from the growing distance between him and Claire. But now, as he sat alone in the wreckage of his marriage, Daniel realized the devastating price of his emotional affair. Across town, Eva paced her apartment, guilt gnawing at her insides. She'd seen the pain in Claire's eyes during chance encounters at the office. She'd heard the strain in Daniel's voice when he spoke of home. And now, as the full extent of the damage became clear, Eva made a decision. She couldn't be the cause of this destruction any longer. With shaking hands, she typed out a message to Daniel. "We can't do this anymore. I'm sorry." She hit send, then deleted his number from her phone. It was over. Days passed in a blur of sleepless nights and unanswered calls. Daniel threw himself into work, trying to drown out the deafening silence of his empty home. But every time he glanced at Ava's empty desk, he was reminded of what he'd lost and what he'd thrown away. One night, unable to bear the weight of his regret any longer, Daniel sat down at his desk. He pulled out a pen and paper, old-fashioned tools for the most important letter he'd ever write. The words flowed, not as an attempt to win Claire back, but as a confession of his failures. "Claire," he began, his handwriting unsteady, "I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness. What I did was unforgivable. I betrayed your trust, your love, and the vows we made to each other. I could try to explain why it happened, but the truth is, there's no excuse. I stopped trying in our marriage long before I turned to Eva. I took you for granted, and by the time I realized what I was losing, it was too late." He poured his heart onto the page, acknowledging every misstep, every moment of weakness. "I'm not writing this to ask for another chance," he continued. "I don't deserve one. I'm writing because you deserve the truth and an apology that can never be enough. I'm sorry, Claire. I'm sorry for the pain I've caused you, for the trust I've broken, and for the future we'll never have." Daniel sealed the letter, his hands trembling. He mailed it the next morning, knowing it might be the last communication he'd ever have with the woman he'd loved for so long. Weeks passed. Daniel moved through life like a ghost, going through the motions at work. avoiding Ava's gaze, returning each night to an empty house that no longer felt like home. He'd given up hope of hearing from Claire, resigned to the knowledge that he'd destroyed something precious beyond repair. Then, one evening, his phone rang. Claire's name flashed on the screen. Daniel's heart raced as he answered, his voice barely above a whisper. "Hello, Daniel?" Claire's voice was steady, calm in a way that made his chest ache. "I got your letter. I've read it ... several times, actually." He held his breath, afraid to shatter this fragile moment. "Claire, Please, let me finish," she interrupted gently. "I'm not calling to reconcile what happened. It's not something I can forget or move past, but I wanted you to know that I'm healing. Your letter ... it helped me understand. Not to forgive, not yet, but to start letting go of the anger." Daniel closed his eyes, tears slipping down his cheeks. "I'm so sorry, Claire. For everything." "I know," she replied softly. "That's why I'm calling. Not to give us another chance, but to say goodbye properly. To tell you that I hope you find peace too, Daniel. We both deserve that." The call ended, leaving Daniel with a broken heart and a hard truth. Sometimes, love fails not because of hate, but because someone stopped trying, and the other one didn't notice until it was too late. In the days that followed, Daniel found himself replaying every moment of his marriage in his mind. The early days of passion and promise, the gradual cooling of affection, the moments when he could have reached out but didn't. He thought of Ava, of the excitement of forbidden emotions, and how hollow it all felt now in the face of what he'd lost. Claire, meanwhile, focused on rebuilding her life. She threw herself into her work, reconnected with old friends, and started therapy. Some days were harder than others, moments when a song on the radio or a familiar scent would bring memories flooding back. But slowly, surely, she began to heal. Ava requested a transfer to another department, unable to face the daily reminder of the pain she'd been part of causing. She deleted Daniel's number from her phone, determined to learn from this experience and never cross such lines again. As weeks turned to months, the raw wound of betrayal began to scab over. Claire found herself smiling more, laughing with friends, even contemplating dating again. Daniel, haunted by his mistakes, committed himself to becoming a better man, not for Claire or Eva, but for himself. 1 year after that fateful text message, Claire stood in front of her bathroom mirror, preparing for a first date. As she applied her lipstick, she caught sight of her wedding ring, still sitting in a small dish on the counter. With a deep breath, she picked it up, turning it over in her hands one last time before placing it in a box at the back of her drawer. It was time to truly move on. Across town, Daniel sat in a therapist's office, finally ready to confront the patterns that had led him to betray the woman he'd once promised to love forever. "I can't change the past," he said, his voice steady, "but I can learn from it. I can be better." As the sun set on another day, 3 lives forever changed by a series of choices continued to move forward. Claire, finding strength in forgiveness. Daniel, carrying the weight of his actions but determined to grow. And Ava, a silent reminder of how quickly things can unravel when boundaries blur. In the end, their story wasn't one of villains and victims, but of human beings, flawed, complex, and capable of both great love and devastating mistakes. It was a reminder that relationships require constant nurturing, that trust is fragile, and that sometimes the hardest person to forgive is yourself. The question lingered, unspoken but ever-present. Can a relationship truly survive betrayal? Or does trust, once broken, shatter irreparably? The answer, perhaps, lies not in the act itself, but in the hearts of those involved, their capacity for forgiveness, their willingness to rebuild, and the painful wisdom gained from walking through fire.